if we have 8 people, do we need a quorum of the full council or a quorum of what, right. Yeah, but if we want to vote, to continue it, we need 6 votes. Give me the total,
Continuation of public hearings of the Salem City Council was held in the council chamber on Wednesday, March 9th, 2016 at 6 p.m. for the purpose of discussing the discontinuance of a public way known as Beckford Way, convey a portion of 297 Bridge Street for the sum of $10,001, and land disposition agreement and conveyance of land to Sun King LLC for the sum of $990,000. Notice of this hearing was posted on February 24th, 2016 at 2:46 p.m. Absent are Councilors McCarthy, Gerard, and Ryan. I also know Councilor Lovely, I believe, is planning to will be with us for a while tonight, but did not expect to be here for the whole meeting, and I believe Councilor Gerard is on her way. Council President Turiel presiding. In attendance, we have all the people who've been here in attendance for just about for the last several public meetings. But first, we have public hearing of the City Council on the discontinuance of a public way known as Beckford Way, aka Beckford Street Extension. So, for that, first we will invite the mayor up to present this to us and take questions, and then we will open up the public hearing.
Thank you. I'm actually going to be very brief this evening. I think people are very familiar with the request that's before you. And there is another competing project this evening meeting that I need to attend with Footprint. We have the petitioner here who has provided you with a copy of a site plan that identifies the area where the proposed way is slated to be relocated as part of this process. And I would invite their attorney to come just walk you through it as opposed to me doing so, given the fact that I may need to be leaving soon.
Thank you. Attorney Carenti?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President, members of the council, Mayor. Joseph Carenti, 63 Federal Street, representing the petitioner, FWM. And we're here, of course, to discuss the discontinuance of Beckford Street Extension, or Beckford Way. And what we've provided to you in our proposal for construction is the drawings. And we've made some extra drawings, so if people want to look, you can please pass those around. They're two-sided, and it's two simple drawings from our plan, which talk about the proposed building and show the proposed way. And what becomes immediately obvious when one looks at the project overview, the way as it's laid out comes right through the middle of the site and goes right up against the building as the building is laid out. It comes right across the docks, and when we look here, this is the proposed building, and the way continues from here to here. So it is our understanding that what is being proposed is a discontinuance of only the portion of the way that runs on the former Universal Steel site. So the historic portion of the way, and this is the paper street or the paper way that comes across the parking lot. That is the proposal is that part be discontinued to allow for the construction and be rerouted. So there's no intent or a plan to prevent any pedestrian access from Federal Street down to Bridge Street. In fact, what's being proposed is the way comes down, and if you look on sort of the flip side of this paper, which shows the access and which is blown up here, what is proposed is that as you come through from down through Federal Street and through the between the houses and down the sort of the steps that are there, as you hit the pavement, that you will then hit, there will be a sidewalk, a paved walkway that will then take you, and that's outlined in the green, that'll take you along the sort of the back of the site and then come right up to meet a sidewalk within the site right to Bridge Street. So Access is certainly being provided from Federal Street to Bridge Street. It's in a different configuration. That's what we want to show you on the plans, and, obviously, we're here for any questions. Thank you.
Any members of the council have any questions they would like to ask? I'll start off with one. So in this proposed reconfiguration, I see obviously that this goes through the beginning part of the dock, the historic portion of the way, the traditional way here. What would prevent people, prospective users, from just simply walking across the parking lot as is?
Nothing.
And the other question, and I know the answer to this part of it, but I'm asking it mainly for just the sake of the record here, is Beckford Way, that portion that exists right now between the two parking lots, is that buildable? 'Cause I know there's an easement there, so is that physically something that can be built upon?
There is an easement there, so I'm not sure. We've avoided putting our building over it, as you can see. So it's probably something that we've chosen not to do. We've deliberately not done that. So I'm not sure if that answers the question of being buildable or not, but we are not going to build on it.
Okay. Councilor Milo.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you. Just a quick question about the storage. See the storage that runs along the path? It says,
Yes.
so what's stored there? How often is it gonna be accessed?
Is that Tom or Bob? We have Bob Maffichuk's here, who is the store manager, and we'll let Bob answer that.
Okay, thanks.
What are you talking about this storage?
Yeah, as exists at our facility today, you can see like the white PVC pipe or the green underground pipe that is typically stored outside. That's just a bulk storage area that exists at the existing web today that would just be relocated to that area for this site.
Okay. So, I'm just thinking somebody's walking down the path, maybe a forklift comes along and you need to access, this is what I'm trying to get at, is I'm just trying to figure out like how often, if people are walking down there, will you need to access that storage? Will it cause a safety issue or?
I would say probably once every 2 weeks.
Oh,
And this is a gated area, so if there was a fork truck in there, it would be entering in a gate. It's not in a area where someone can just walk right through that portion. If they came down the existing way and wanted to walk straight through where the loading docks are, providing there's no trucks there, I mean, there's nothing stopping them at that point. The red dotted area that show the existing way between Alpha is to the left, and the parking lot, temporary parking lot is to the right as it exists today.
okay. So, but accessing that storage facility isn't gonna be a problem for?
No, the
Pedestrians.
sidewalk area in green, I mean, that would be fenced off.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Famico.
Thank you. Would part of these plans also be, I know when you go up that public way and you get to where it's River in Beckford, it's a little uneasy at the top of that area. There's some stone steps would be part of the proposal, although it's not your land to fix that area up some, or?
So, correct, we're not, it's not part of what we're talking about, but when we get into a planning board process, we'd be happy to talk about those type of issues and what makes it sort of more accessible, any type of improvements. That would be something that we could certainly discuss at planning board.
Any other members have questions? Councilor Dibble.
Yes, through you, Mr. President. Thank you. If we just clarify a little bit about the easement on this plan here, if we can work off of this one here. And again, through the president, can we clarify what the utility easement is? The red line, the dotted red lines, is that the existing right-of-way? And now will become a utility easement? Or is the right-of-way a different size, different shape?
There's a sewer line that runs down, that has run down there for many, many years. So there's a utility easement there that the city engineer did not want to have anything constructed upon. So there's that. And in addition to that, there's the Beckford Way. Many years ago, city engineer Bornstein went before the city council, and not following the right process of public hearing and plans and so on and so forth, added this way onto the list of public streets. That's why I suggested that this be discontinued. It wasn't accepted properly, it wasn't laid out, it's too narrow for a public street, it's not approved. None of those things happened, but it still shows in the city records as a public way.
Okay. What I'm trying to get at is the location of the existing underground utilities. If all the city utilities fall within that dotted line, so that the building is not encroaching upon any utilities and causing trouble in the future.
That's our understanding, correct. Yeah.
Do we have a plan that shows where the utilities are, that you could share with us, either maybe at the next meeting?
We don't, but the city might. So we could look at that, yeah? And we could pursue that, sure.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Any further questions of the petitioners by members? Okay. Well, seeing none, thank you, gentlemen. At this point now, we will open the public hearing portion of this testimony. Just to sort of review, testimony is just on the discontinuance of Beckford Way. I know in our previous discussions about surplus and about zoning, and the ones that will be coming about the actual purchase and sale agreement itself, there's a myriad of topics that are hit upon by it, but that touches this particular hearing, though, is strictly about the Beckford Way discontinuance. So I ask that of all petitioners who are both pro and con on this to stay strictly on topic to it. And again, we've said this before at the beginning of our other hearings, please try and stay on topic. And also, if somebody else has already made the points that you'd like to make, we hope that you let them make it for you. And anything that you would like to submit to us, also please submit in writing to the city clerk so that we all get it distributed to ourselves. So with that said, we will open up to, and again, I'll be running a timer over here. You have approximately 5 minutes to make, up to 5 minutes to make your point. When the timer goes off, we will ask you to wrap it up, and hopefully you do so, and we don't gavel. So, with that, we'll start on this side of the room like we usually do. Anybody who would like to speak in favor of the discontinuance? And we will just work our way around and out into the hallway and around the room and so forth and so on. So this is the chance to speak in favor of the discontinuance. Seeing none there, we'll now open it up again. We'll go in the same order, and people who would like to speak against the discontinuance. And you come up, state your name and address for the record, and again, please use the guidelines that I shared with you. So starting on this side. Either first, we'll go, which one of you wants to go first?
I'm just going to pass these out.
Are you going together? Okay.
Carol is passing out some material, so I don't have to think about doing both.
No problem.
Good evening. I'm still Jana Chauzier, and I still reside at 15.5 River Street. Seems like we've been here before. Mayor Driscoll, President Turiel, and members of the City Council, I am opposed to the dissolution of and the rerouting of a portion of Beckford Way. Why is Beckford Way even important? It may seem like a very small matter when put up against the health, quality of life, zoning, and economic considerations under discussion, but when looked at in a larger context, it feels like just one more public right that we're being asked to give up. One of the goals of the North River Canal Corridor Master Plan is to strengthen Leslie's Retreat Park as a city amenity by more effectively connecting it to the surrounding neighborhoods. The possibility for future recreational and educational programming could make the park a more widely used community asset. Beckford Way provides both a physical and visual link to open green space where people can walk, bike, run, and children can play. In fact, a pedestrian overpass across Bridge Street has been discussed as a possibility to be located somewhere between North Street and Flint Street. It is difficult to quantify the public benefit. However, it has undoubtedly been shown that neighborhoods thrive when accessibility to open green space is provided. As I look at surrounding communities, Beverly, Marblehead, Rockport, and Gloucester, and I read the transcripts of concerned citizens working with municipalities to identify, declare, and provide public access to old ways, historic footpaths, cart paths, and wagon trails, and to protect and preserve their viability, I'm disappointed that Salem is talking about discontinuing and rerouting a portion of one of those public historic ways across very modern and dangerous tractor-trailer lanes. The city claims the path will be paved and well lighted, making it safer than a dirt path along the edge of the Alpha Auto lot where it is currently located. I can't imagine how walking across a truck lane is safer or a more pleasant pedestrian experience than walking along the perimeter of a parking lot. The residents of River Street have done considerable work along the path, particularly at the top of the street where they have painstakingly laid a brick walkway, hung baskets of flowers and greens as wayfinding to indicate the continuation of Beckford Street down the hill, and they have plans to install additional granite steps. It is bad enough we have received no help from the city in this endeavor, but we never imagined the path would be under threat from the city. After all, the public way has been there for centuries and survived quite nicely until now. These funny, quirky, idiosyncratic land uses that connect us to the past and quite literally to one another are part of what gives Salem her charm and character and allows us to creatively and imaginatively chart her future. Just ask any child who has imagined a hidden stairway leading to a new adventure. I envision Beckford Way as part of a system of pathways and walkways throughout the city, making public transportation more accessible, connecting neighborhoods, and promoting a healthier and greener environment. Donna Sager's wonderful piece on the history of the public way is appropriately entitled, "Losing Our Way." We haven't lost it yet. Please vote no on this proposal before you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jane Stauffer. My husband and I live at 28 Beckford Street. I'm here to oppose the discontinuance of Beckford Way and the Webb Warehouse being built there on Bridge Street. I am a lifelong Salem resident. I've seen this North River change and improve in appearance. We now have a chance to reclaim even more of the river area and preserve its historic features. Beckford Way has been a public path to the water since the 1600s. And I and another neighbor, Ann Knight, collected these maps to show you. It was filled in during the late 1800s. It is a rare and original feature of the city. It was here before River Street or even, Federal Street and even River Street were laid. It is the only one of many public ways that were in the North River area. It should be preserved as is and not diverted as proposed. The next picture is a city map in 1911, and as you can see, it's now been filled in, and it's basically the way it looks today, and most of the houses there are still there. Beckford Way is special It's been used for over 350 years. It's still being used today. It's a practical way for the public to get to Bridge Street safely. The city's website describes Salem as a vibrant, pedestrian-friendly city. Discontinuing Beckford Way will do just the opposite. The vast majority of people using it are walking to the train station, the dog park, Leslie's Retreat Park, downtown, and North Salem. Yet pedestrian access in the web plan diverts it in the opposite direction. We've all seen that today on the large picture they brought. It will now be diverted through a tractor-trailer roadway and a loading dock. It ends in an area of Bridge Street where there are no real sidewalks. Beckford Way will not be improved or safe for pedestrians. And I have two pictures. One of them I took in January, right after that first snow, and as you can see, it's a well-used pathway. The proposed plan by Webb Plumbing destroys the usefulness but also the character of Beckford Way. Tonight in Salem, we're talking about discontinuing a public way, while in Rockport, they have worked since the late 1960s to preserve theirs. There are 45 public ways to the water in Rockport. In Gloucester, there are 38, while in nearby Beverly, there are over a dozen. In Marblehead, there are 8 in Old Town and 10 more out on the Neck. And I went into Marblehead and took some pictures. And as you can see, it looks an awful lot like Beckford Way. Here in Salem, I found 2 that were marked. Kelleher Way, which is between Fowler Street and Federal Street, and then the one I've pictured here, which is down the Willows. It's right off of Winter Island Road. When I walk out my front door, take a few steps to the street and glance to the right, I'm looking at the top of Beckford Way. I have an open view of Bridge Street, the dog park, and the river, and a safe walkway. If this plan goes forward, I'll be looking at a loading dock where there is noise, diesel fumes, and bright lights. Please do not sell Beckford Way. Keep it for the residents of Salem. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to speak next? Go ahead, Jim.
Good evening, members of the council and the public. You all have the map, so I won't pass out anymore. I'm here this evening to address 2 important public safety concerns associated with the proposed discontinuation and sale of the historic Beckford Street public way. The first issue focuses on pedestrian safety, and the second concern looks at some of the negative consequences of selling a city-owned property with important underground utilities. Webb's proposal to redevelop the Universal Steel and Alpha Auto lots and provide an alternative pedestrian route on the current historic path sounds great in theory, but its practicality is wanting. Let me show you what I mean. If you please refer to picture 1, of course in my map, I have it access to Beckford and River Street. I will first direct your attention to the current historic walkway between the neighborhood and Bridge Street, shown as the interrupted red line. So that is the straight pathway here that's marked with red lines. The straight walkway measures 118 feet. Now focus your attention on the green polka-dotted route at the bottom of your plan. This is the proposed alternative route. Coming from the neighborhood, this route requires a pedestrian to first walk in a westerly direction for 118 feet, then walk north for 45 feet, and then back east for a distance of 137 feet. Using the proposed alternative pedestrian easement, one will be required to walk a total of a distance of 300 feet. Now, I like walking, but some people don't. Remember, the current path is only 118 feet long. As you look at the existing straight path and the alternative circuitous route, it's obvious that use of either route will be unsafe for a pedestrian or bicyclist once the site is developed as shown. That being said, I believe that most pedestrians, especially commuters to the train that are late, will continue to use the straight route. And I don't think there's any way Webb or anybody else that would develop this property could keep them off this straight path. That being said, I believe that most pedestrians, especially commuters, will continue to use the path. It's human nature to take the shortest way. A handicap parking area, this pedestrian taking this path will take you through the truck loading docks, and it will also take you through the handicap parking areas, and then exit through an entrance driveway to the Webb lot. From a public safety standpoint, this desired pedestrian route will go from being safe, which it's been safe for over 350 years, to being hazardous. Unfortunately, again, Webb will not be able to prohibit the public from using this original straight way. Now, Webb's proposed alternative route, seen in green, is even more dangerous. This route lies within the main two-way vehicle access to the parking lot and truck loading docks. It forces a pedestrian to walk within a vehicle lane and then cross the incoming and outgoing lanes of traffic on the site. Furthermore, please note the location of one of the two outside storage areas. Now, yes, they put pipes, they put tanks, they put whatever, but there are things like forklifts that have to go in and out, and it is gated off, so the person isn't going to be walking, through that area, but they're going to be walking nearby as vehicles come in and out, and maybe perhaps clients that are picking up things from the outside storage area. The storage area is enclosed in a gated area with sliding gate doors, but vehicles trying to access the plumbing inventory within the outside will be operating in the pedestrian easement route. Now look at the picture labeled Proposed Building Project Overview. Please note that there are 3 curb cuts on Bridge Street allowing traffic to enter the site at 3 areas. This is a danger to any pedestrian in the lot, customer or walkway user, because cars will be entering or leaving this small lot from all directions. It should be noted that the section of Bridge Street that runs along the Alpha Auto and Universal Steel sites is not designated by the city as an official entrance corridor overlay district. This is important for 2 reasons. First, only 2 curb cuts are allowed for development in an entrance corridor. And then the fewer the curb cuts, the fewer the left-hand turns in and out of the development. This is a traffic safety issue, not only in the parking lot, but on Bridge Street, which is so close to the ramps to 114 and the MBTA station traffic signals. Second, because this part of Bridge Street is not in an entrance corridor, new developments in the area are not subject to design review. I have to wrap this up, so I think the second issue that must be considered when discontinuing and selling Beckford Street Way is the long-time use of a utility easement. At the current time, the underground utilities include a gas line, sewer line, and a storm drain. City engineering records show that the sewer line was overhauled around 1983 or 1984. That being said, over the years, the underground utilities that run the length of the way have not been stressed by heavy vehicles. Although Webb will not be able to build on this utility easement, it is likely that the heavy trucks on this easement and the nearby construction of new buildings will certainly stress the utility infrastructure. Who's going to pay the price when these underground utilities are broken? If they require repair, will the city have difficulty with access because of the proximity of the Webb building and the fact that the land right next to it is contaminated? Finally, it's my understanding that if the city sells the public way, it could possibly lose a small portion of Massachusetts' unrestricted general local aid that goes to cities and towns for police and fire, parks, and public works. This aid is doled out in part based on the amount of streets a municipality has, and I believe this has been considered part of the streets in Salem. So I'm not 100% sure on that. I have asked about that, but something you might want to look at. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you give us a copy of that, a written copy of that for the record?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Next person. He was up first.
Hi, I'm Fred Biebesheimer. I live at 17.5 River Street in Salem. I'll speak briefly in opposition to the discontinuance of the public way to allow other people to have some time as well. I use the public way daily to get to the train. The only time I don't use it is when the Salem Ferry is running and I do an alternate route. And I view the public way as an integral part of my community. Others have already spoken about the history. My opposition to the selling of it is based on the alarming precedent it seems to set for the future. The sale will be inconsistent with any reasonable notion of public property stewardship. If the city's willing to sell this piece of land to a billion-dollar corporation, what's next? And I came up with a couple examples. If CVS on Essex Street wants to add another drive-through lane, are we going to just sell them a small portion of Splain Park because that doesn't generate any tax revenue? If Wendy's on Lafayette Street or National Grid on Peabody Street need additional parking or a place for another transformer, do we carve out a piece of that park on Peabody Street? When North Shore Medical wants to expand to stay competitive, do we make Bertram Field just a little bit smaller, or I say somewhat jokingly ask the football players to move the ball 300 feet to the west before going for a touchdown? When the city of Salem sold Liberty Street to the Peabody Essex Museum a number of years ago, it was a clear case could be made that there was a compelling and compelling greater good to the city as a whole. The same doesn't hold true with this proposal, which is designed to benefit a single private corporation, not the community as a whole. This proposal makes no sense to me, and I urge you to vote no. Thank you.
Thank you. There's somebody coming up on. If you want to go up there and wait.
Oh, I'm sorry. Tim Doggett, 9 Lynn Street. Listen carefully, councilors, and you will hear the echoes of the debate in this chamber over the direction of urban renewal 40 years ago. The debate was about the preservation versus demolition. Today's debate is about preserving a significant historic site versus altering it in some Frankensteinian manner that would destroy its uniqueness. To my mind, that is like moving 2 of the gables from the House of 7 Gables in order to widen Turner Street. The early settlers, in order to facilitate development of Salem, laid out rights of way from the rivers to the center of Salem, the center of the peninsula. The right-of-ways in the immediate area of Beckford Street are Flint and North Streets, Washington, and St. Peter. Purley, in his history of Salem, was able to identify them from the deeds and the real estate transfer records. Of all the rights of way, the only one left unaltered that hasn't been destroyed, covered over, hot-topped, rebuilt, is this one at Beckford Street. It should be preserved. And I would ask you to consider that when you take your vote. This is important. It is the only one in Salem. It is quite likely the only one in existence where you can say this is where the settlers stepped off their boat onto the land. Please consider that when you vote. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lou Sirianni, Botts Court, Salem. President Terrell, councilors. Old-timers like me remember the Essex Institute. I think there are a few of you around that also remember that. They owned a half a dozen antique houses in Salem that were open to the public. 2 of those houses presently exist on Federal Street. The PEM sent people to China, and they moved a Chinese house back to Salem. Now, why did they do that? They did that because the house is the same age as the houses on Federal and nearby streets. They wanted us to see how different things were at the same time in China as in Salem. Pretty significant stuff. For those of us who live in antique houses, we understand our role as stewards of those historic structures, and we accept that responsibility and the cost associated with that. You might think of this as similar to a curator at the Penn, and I know you're very familiar with that, Counselor, who cares for artifacts that have the same vintage as our houses. It all ties together. Houses, furniture, artwork, china, sidewalks, walkways. This is the living history of a historic town. The historic streetscape is an important component of that. In towns like Portland, Maine, Rockport, Gloucester, Beverly, etc., their public walkways are embraced and they're promoted by their city administrations as valuable and important historic elements that enhance their city. Gravelways are accepted and maintained, especially on the small residential streets that are the equivalent of Beckford Way. In Salem, it seems that the city has not embraced the idea of historic streets and ways, but you have an opportunity to change that. The thing about Beckford Street is that it starts at Essex and is more or less in the middle of the McIntyre Historic District. The way to the North River was the route well trafficked when there were ships on the tidal river. Now, it is a regularly used neighborhood by neighborhood people going to the train or to the park. Detail for your consideration, I have found it disconcerting that there is not a gate into the park right there at the bottom of Beckford Way. That would make it even easier to get there. Just like the city recently paved the well-used path from North Salem to the T station, right over the same tracks. In summary, let us preserve this well-used little piece of history, just like all of our North Shore neighbors have done. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, could you give us the written copy of that?
I will.
Or just submit it later? Great, thank you.
Good evening, my name is Meg Toohey. I live at 122 Federal Street. I want to speak to a little different side of Beckford Way. I do oppose selling it. Where the present Beckford Way meets the Bridge Street has been measured by a neighbor to be within the 250-foot jurisdiction limits of Chapter 91. As you may know, Chapter 91 was enacted to protect public access to the water. The discontinuance of this way flies in the face of the intent of this law. Beckford Way lies within the flood overlay district of the city's own zoning ordinances. One of the main purposes of this district is, and I quote, to protect the natural flood control characteristics and the water storage capacity of floodplains. As you might know, the public way is the last permeable strip of land between Alpha Auto and Universal Steel. To pave over Beckford Way would be, in effect, removing water storage capacity for the entire project, including Universal and Alpha Auto. The water that won't be absorbed by the ground will flood the street and surrounding properties, which brings us up another purpose for the flood overlay district. Again, I quote, to protect persons and property from hazard and loss through the regulation of future development of lands adjoining water courses. I hope you will join me in opposing the sale. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to address this? Yep.
Hi, my name is Ann Whittier. I live at 10 River Street. You folks have been very gracious and polite while we've made our presentations, and I really appreciate the opportunity of having to speak before you for a couple of times. When I last spoke on the issue of surplus, I tried to show how necessary this parcel and public way are to our tourism industry, which really, that's our bread and butter. I believe this parcel and the adjacent public way is as yet undervalued, but an integral part that will serve as a welcoming place for tourists to end their drive and begin their tour of our city on foot. After all, what is an entrance corridor without a point of entry? While Marblehead, Rockport, Ipswich, and Gloucester celebrate their public ways, unfortunately, our mayor has dismissed Old Beckford Way as, in her words, a goat path. If it resembles a goat path, it is because the city has done nothing much to help us care for it. Neighbors have contributed bricks and granite steps, and they've shored up the rest of the steps as best they could. But neighbors' resources can only stretch so far. No, it's not a goat path that this area resembles. What it resembles to me more is Proctor's Ledge. In 1936, during the Great Depression, the city of Salem somehow scrimped together enough money to buy the area surrounding Proctor's Ledge with its view up the North River. It was, to quote the old documents, to be held forever as a public park and memorial. Now, a Walgreens stands in front of it, blocks the view up the North River. Some people have said perhaps a plaque could be set in the cosmetics aisle of Walgreens saying, from this spot in 1692, 19 people walked to their execution. Have you seen it lately? It's overgrown with scrub maples, littered with trash and liquor bottles, and a few sleeping bags. No signage of any kind commemorates the innocent lives that were lost. It is truly today a sad place to visit. How can it be that the city leadership seems to care so little for its historic places? Cares so little for the face we present to our visitors who come eager to look for real history, eager to spend their money, trusting that we want them and have something to show them. People come to Salem from all over the world. As much as I'd love to be a fly on the wall any place John Lennon might have been, I cringe to think of his reaction after having come to Salem to see the spot where our second greatest claim to fame occurred. There was nothing to see. No monument, no groomed area, no contemplative park. Let's not lose any more of our history to short-sighted development. Salem's history does not belong to this or any other administration. Instead, it grew generation by generation, thanks to people who loved their hometown, did their best to keep it up as they could, in the proud belief that they were leaving something for future generations to appreciate. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else in the room wish to speak in opposition to the discontinuance?
My name is Carol Carr. I live at 7 River Street. I am absolutely opposed to closing the Beckford Public Way, which has been in existence since 1628. It's nearly 400 years old. Why on earth would anyone consider blocking this public way just to accommodate diesel trucks that have to make deliveries and back into a loading dock? The mayor has called it an unconstructed way: Billy Goat Hill, Remainder Path, Old Town Way, and Walkway. She described it as pretty rocky, not the easiest place to access, and the area adjacent to the Universal Steel site was never really paved. It was kind of overgrown. But you know what? Maybe that's the nature of a public way. Other cities and towns embrace their public ways, as you've heard earlier, and are preserving them for future generations. We talked about downtown area of Rockport, there are 15, and in Marblehead's downtown there are 8. And they call them secret passages and have names like Alley Steps, Lookout Court, and Hollyhock Lane. If you take a moment, I'd like you to look at the photos I handed out. So on page 1, you'll see 2 photos of a public way called Alley Steps. You'll see worn-out granite steps, crooked and steep, and traditionally lined by hollyhock flowers. It was once used by fishermen to climb the hill to spread fish on wooden racks to dry. If you turn the page and go to page 2, you'll see 3 photos of a public way that begins as a paved street known as Knights Hill Road and quickly turns into a narrow dirt and gravel path leading down a steep hill between houses. If you turn to page 3, we have 5 photos. Both 5 5 photos of both ends of a public way called Lookout Court and Prospect Alley. It begins at what looks like a road, but it's open only for foot traffic, which then narrows to stone steps and a small path between houses. And if you turn to page 4, you'll see 3 photos of a public way called Hollyhock Lane, which begins as a narrow flagstone path, becomes a grassy lane, and ends in a cobblestone driveway. So these all kind of look like the Beckford Street Way in one way or another. Marblehead received grant money from the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Management to erect signs at several public ways and even paid for repairs. In Salem, River and Beckford Street didn't get any grants, but the neighbors took it upon themselves to improve the entrance by laying granite and brick steps at the Beckford Street entrance. The city didn't do that. We did it because we realized the importance of preserving history. Other cities, as you've heard, such as Gloucester, has 38 public ways, and Beverly has many, and one, which is located on Prince Street, which according to Google Maps is only 800 feet away from Mr. Pope's residence on Curtis Point. Why are other cities and towns preserving and celebrating their public ways, and Salem is destroying ours? The Beckford Public Way was never, ever used for industrial purposes. It has always been respected, even by Universal and Alpha Auto in their heyday. According to the Massachusetts State Historic Preservation Plan, and I quote, "Historic and cultural resources found in the cities and towns of Massachusetts are significant to our understanding of our past. They establish our sense of connection to our communities, and they are the very reason people choose to live, work, and visit here." Salem should celebrate its own Beckford Public Way with an historic marker at both ends of the public way, saying something like this: "Enjoy Beckford Public Way, which in 1628 led you down to the edge of the North River where the current Bridge Street is now located. As you stroll down Beckford Way, imagine that you are walking in the footsteps of John Beckford in 1739, John Chandler, who was an officer in the Revolutionary War and built his house in 1788, William Ferguson, a tailor, in 1790, John Jenkins, a tailor, in 1799, Daniel Bancroft Jr., 1806, a housewright who was the son and namesake of the builder who built McIntyre's principal buildings." Almost done, promise. How many other cities and towns can make claim to a public way that has been around for nearly 400 years? You all have a tremendous amount of pressure on your shoulders right now, coming at you from all sides. I realize that. You have to make decisions on monumental issues: zoning, surplus, the public way, the RFP. But believe me, this is not the first time it has happened, and it won't be the last time. My husband and I have lived through controversial times in the city, but we and many of our neighbors had a vision of what Salem could be. We have fought long and hard to have what we have today, and we are proud of the legacy that we leave to our children and the next generation. When there were plans in the 60s to put Route 128 right through the center of downtown Salem, what side would you have been on? Oh, you can sit here and look back and say, that's an easy one. Of course I would have opposed it. But trust me, back then it was not so obvious to everyone, and there was a lot of pressure to bear. In the publication entitled History of Historic Preservation Planning in Massachusetts, you'll find this reference to Salem, and I quote, "In 1971, plans to demolish downtown Salem are reversed. Thank God we had some great people up leading us. Have we learned anything from that? Are you ready to demolish a 400-year-old public way, and for what?" In my last paragraph, "You have a major decision to make, one that will last for the next 100 years and beyond, long after perhaps Webb has moved away. You are entrusted with protecting our heritage, not tossing it aside and destroying it. So what will your legacy be to your children? Will they stand at the corner of Beckford and River Street and see the Beckford Public Way closed, ending with the vision of a truck making deliveries? Or will your children stand at the corner of Beckford Street and River Street and say to you, can you imagine, in 2016, there were plans to discontinue this public way? I'm so glad you reversed that plan, so today I too can walk in the footsteps of John Chandler, William Ferguson, and John Beckford.
Good evening. Jennifer Firth, President of Historic Salem, 9 North Street. Historic Salem does not support the discontinuance of the Beckford Street Public Way. The way is on Historic Salem's most endangered list, and the discontinuance of the centuries-old public way would alter an important and valuable historic amenity which has been continuously used throughout the centuries and lovingly maintained by the residents. For context, Historic Salem established the most endangered historic resources program in 2000 to focus attention on specific endangered resources that are threatened by neglect, lack of funding, or inappropriate development. It's the cornerstone of Historic Salem's advocacy effort in pursuit of its mission to ensure that the historic resources of Salem are preserved for future generations and that new development does not compromise the historic character of the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak in opposition to the discontinuance? Justin?
Justin Whittier, 10 River Street. I just want to associate myself with the remarks of my neighbors and just offer 2 thoughts. I'm opposed to giving up Beckford Way, and I just want to suggest to you the example offered by Boston Common, which I used to walk a lot, and get a kick out of the fact that they had laid out very clear paths all through the Common, and those were routinely ignored by people, and so they were dirt paths that would connect between walkways, regardless of the ways that had been laid out. And I think the exact same thing is going to happen here. I think people going to and from the train, and that's most of the traffic that's there, are going to still take the direct route, regardless of what's been laid out for them. And I think that does raise safety issues with the traffic that's going to be coming in and out of there. And I also just want to bring up the NRCC, which still does rule in this matter, and whose intent was to make sure that all development made access to and from the trains easier and safer. And I think this flies in the face of that. Thank you.
Thank you. One more out in the hallway, I see.
Alex Marks of Botts Court. I also wanted to add my name to those concerned about the discontinuance of Beckford Way. I think cities work long and hard to have connections like this, natural connections. It's natural when you're at the top of Beckford Street looking down to the corridor. Just carefully consider before you make changes like this. Imagine in the future trying to reestablish connections. As a new resident of Salem, I enjoy connecting to Leslie's Retreat Park. I think it's a big part of those moving to cities like this in this day and age over the next 10, 20 years. Beckford Way is an amenity. It connects to an amenity. It's a good way to sort of wayfind, to come to the end of the neighborhood and look down and recognize where the train station is, where the park is, to further connect with other neighborhoods across the canal. So the cities work really hard to try to reestablish these connections. So before you undo something that's already there, think long and hard, please, about the purported benefits of making these changes, because these changes will last for a long time. And others had mentioned, and I agree, the fact that it's not paved over does a lot to help manage flood, stormwater runoff to be diverted into that area to be infiltrated through the soil rather than directly back into the North River Canal. That's going to be very important for the city to consider from an engineering and cost and maintenance expense 20, 30 years from now. So think ahead, please, to what it's like for the city to have to manage these changes as we evolve as a town that appreciates having these corridors to connect to the park, but also to mass transit. Many people enjoy not having a car and walking. These footpaths are perfect for that. And it's part of what I consider where Salem's great value is going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wish to speak in opposition?
My name is Constance Arlander, live at 91 Federal Street, and I'm against the discontinuation and sale of the historic Beckford Street Public Way because of the pedestrian safety concerns and the other points that have already been explained by my neighbors tonight, Gloucester, Rockport, and Marblehead are just 4 communities that celebrate public ways. Why can't Salem?
Thank you. David?
Good evening. My name is David Hard. I'm a resident of 104 Federal Street in Salem. And for the record, I'm a member of the Historical Commission, but tonight I'm speaking as a private citizen as well as an abutter. We've heard a lot of testimony concerning the philosophical aspects of the discontinuance of the public way, and I would like to focus on the practicalities of the discontinuance. I would like to address the issue of site contamination and building siting. My understanding is that the site is presently capped with asphalt, and there is sufficient contamination on site now, such that there is a limitation on how much time a human being can spend on the site.
David, the contamination issue we've already, has been covered in the other thing. This is strictly about the
I understand that, but if the public way is discontinued, then there's going to be a building built on top of the area right
adjacent to it.
Adjacent to it, and excavation would have to occur in the public way.
Would be unable to do the easement.
Pardon me?
Would be unable to due to the easement.
That's correct.
So
My understanding is that no one is allowed to be on the site for more than 16 hours per week. If a building is erected on the site and on right adjacent to the public way, it is understood that it would stand to reason that the site has to be remediated and cleared of site contamination, which contributes to the limitation of the 16 hours. Therefore, it would appear the soil would have to be removed rather than merely subjected to pilings being driven to support a new building. Therefore, it would...
Mr. President?
Yeah, Mr. Hart.
Point of order.
This is not within the bounds of the discussion. So if you wish to speak strictly to the discontinuance itself, that's fine, but the remediation, excavation, and other issues are not part of this.
Well, I take it in a different light, but I have to defer to you, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak to the discontinuance specifically in opposition? Go ahead.
I'll make it quick. Jeremiah Jennings, 18 River Street. I'm opposed to the discontinuation for all of the reasons stated.
Thank you. Anybody else? Go ahead.
Barbara Cleary, 104 Federal Street. I'm also opposed to the discontinuance of Beckford Way for all the reasons people have said. I just have 2 observations. One is that it doesn't seem appropriate to call this a rerouting of the public way. This seems to me to be a discontinuance of a public way and the creation of an easement, which is very different from a rerouting of a public way. It'd be interesting to know what the terms of that easement are going to be. Second of all, it seems to me there's a significant disconnect between the city's public persona as a progressive, complete streets, transit-oriented, walkable city of the future, and its willingness to give up a walkway that goes directly between neighborhoods and the train station. In other words, the city is talking the talk, but they're not walking the walk, if I may use that metaphor.
Go ahead.
John Carr, 7 River Street. It seems to me that you don't change something that is nearly 400 years old very lightly. You should only even consider it if there is an overwhelming, compelling reason. And I just don't see anything even remotely close to an overwhelming, compelling reason. Now, ironically, all during the days when universal wrecking and trading was at its worst, polluting the site, polluting the atmosphere, even they respected the public way. All during the bad old days when Alpha was running its used car lot, they didn't impinge on the public way. Here we have a universal site that is cleaned up, and we have a park, and we have the beginning of this whole North River corridor beginning to be on the mend, and this is a throwback. This is a relapse. Now, if you think about it, if you think about the overpass in the 18th century as a kind of fulcrum, all of the streets that were perpendicular to the North River, whether west of what is now the overpass or east of what is now the overpass, ended in the river. West of the overpass, we filled in to the train tracks in 1883, and we created Bridge Street. And east, we had the railroad tracks down there. So all of those streets between Bridge and the river that formerly ended in the river now ended in the train tracks and down west of the public way, whether it was Flint Street, whether it was Carpenter, whether it was River, or Beckford. They all ended in the river and then in Bridge Street. Now, actually, the public way, Bridge Street, Beckford Street north of River was always as wide as all of the other streets, but there was a land swap in 1796 which reduced it by half. And that allowed for the creation of number 2 River, and Beckford Street public way ever since has been as you see it. What's down there? Well, in the opening remarks, there was discussion of a water main. There is a major water main, but there is also a major gas main, which ends in a T-junction under Bridge Street. And that connects with a major gas line parallel with the northerly curb of Federal Street. And there is a major storm drain running from a catch basin at the end of Beckford Street all the way down to Bridge, and all three are under the so-called Beckford Street public way. So Salem, and you know what, the discussion tonight has sort of vacillated between sort of history and nostalgia and then practicalities. But I suggest to you that those who have made the points that there will be a loading dock immediately at the bottom of the public way that will receive trucks parallel with the rear property lines of the houses on the northerly side of River will now cross that public way. And as Jane Arlander said, will now stress those three public utilities, and that has never happened before. How brittle cast iron pipes are, I don't know. How brittle are whatever is the piping material for the storm drain or the gas line, I don't know. But is that one more risk that this city council wants to take? I would think not. Now let me get to the fuzzy side, the history. You know, Salem on its letterhead celebrates Salem still making history. But so much in this administration, it seems to be just cheap sloganeering. How about, as Barbara Clary said, walking the walk and not just talking the talk? You know, at the bottom of the Beckford Street public way was probably the only spot where if you looked east in the 18th, I'll be under a minute. If you looked east, you would see where the Leslie's Retreat, incident occurred in February of whatever year, 1775. You could look west and you could see Proctor's Ledge in the 17th century and see where those unfortunate victims were executed. And as someone else said, how forward-thinking it was at the height of the Depression, 1932, for your predecessor council to allocate $1,000 to acquire Proctor's Ledge and preserve it forever so that it could be one day cleaned up and made into an amenity. It seems like if the attitude that is being pushed today prevails, we would have had development on top of it. There are practical reasons not to discontinue the public way. There are, if we really mean it, when we say we're a city where we're still making history, let's vitiate that and as Barbara says, walk the walk and not just talk the talk. Thank you very much.
Cigar. Anybody else from the public?
Thank you. Darrell Lebovisi, 122 Federal Street. I'd like to follow up on a point that has been made a couple of times about the risks of heavy traffic over the utility pipes. If anyone wants a tangible demonstration of why that risk should not be taken, think of about 2 or 3 years ago when there was a major series of waterline breaks along Flint Street between Bridge Street and Mason. The reason was because these old pipes were broken by heavy truck traffic, and since that time, trucks are prohibited from Flint Street. Think about that before you allow a series of actions which would allow heavy truck traffic over these utility pipes along the public way. I oppose the discontinuance of the public way, and I urge that you do the same.
Thank you.
I haven't prepared anything, but I just wanted to add my name to the list. I'm Tim Obert. I live at 170 Federal Street. I've lived in Salem for 11 years. The 3 main reasons I chose to move to Salem were for its charm, its walkability, and access to public transportation. And I think making this change goes against all 3 of those things. And I think it's something that we should keep in mind. It makes people want to live here, and I think it's an important asset to our community.
Thank you. Any other members of the public?
Steve Whittier, 10 River Street, and I'd just like to point out, as far as what's just been discussed about these pipelines that we don't know where they go. You can just look at Danversport several years ago and what happened there. There was a huge explosion that blew away a whole neighborhood, and it was due to pipes that had deteriorated, unbeknownst to anybody. But it came as a surprise, but not a pleasant one. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one more, it looks like. Please.
My name's Elizabeth Nugent, 12 River Street. Forgive me, I have to read this because I'm not good off the cuff. Okay, my husband and I, Pete, are opposed to the discontinuance of Beckford Way. Beckford Way is an important part of our family-oriented, pedestrian-friendly neighborhood, which I've said before. Just asked my daughter, who was raised on River Street, in her 15 years on River Street, Beckford Way has been a sledding hill, an escape path for capture the flag, and the best way to access the veggies at the farm co-op. It is a very well-used path, and it's beautiful. Really, it has a huge amount of charm. For my husband and I, it is an important part of the character of River Street. Instead of the rerouting of the way, it instead needs a sign for pedestrians reading public path. Salem is a city of the future, a walkable city with access to public transportation. I'm sure it's very special in that regard. Bridge and River Street are at the heart of this easy access to the MBTA. We should be improving this access. The connection to the park and the train is just obvious, and it's impractical to be moving it around a big metal box. It's just not going to work that way. Tourists stream down our streets in September, October more than once, many, many times, but definitely more than once, I've received the comment, "You are so lucky to live on this street." Many people with accents, because I'm not sure they look at America as being as charming as where they've come from, as far as their cities. How embarrassing would it be for someone to return and see this change? Once this is changed, we can't go back. Please look forward and preserve this gem, an amenity to the entire city. It really is. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else yet who has?
My name is Susan Weldon. I live at 106 Federal. I really wasn't planning on saying anything, but I got moved by all of these presentations. I support the opposition to the discontinuance and/or diversion of the public way for all the excellent reasons presented this evening. In particular, I'm concerned and saddened about the lack of effort on the part of the city to preserve any part of this historic property, and they're not put their visions for the future at the very beginning of all of their thoughts. Today, I was standing at the top of Beckford Way and looking down at the water collecting on Bridge Street during high tide. And a woman came up from behind me and said, can I go down here, or is this private? And I said, no, it's a public way. I was very pleased to be able to say. She was carrying this heavy box. And I watched her as she navigated her way down and went to the very unnecessary parking lot. I just simply can't understand how, in a gateway corridor, this quaint, useful path could be lost to the proposed project or rerouted to take people so out of their way so that they have to walk through paths of cars and trucks. I live on the corner of Federal and Beckford in a house built by John Chandler. All summer and fall I encounter tourists asking questions, a lot like Liz, and they come through the neighborhood full of wonder and amazement at what they're walking through. I take great pride in telling them George Washington traveled down this street, and don't miss the sea captain houses, go down here, turn left, and then come back up. I also love to be able to point them to the public way, to take them down to Leslie's Retreat. We need to honor the past and rethink what is the best for the future, not what is serving the right now. Tourists don't come here to shop for plumbing supplies, they come for the history. Thank you.
Thank you.
President, is it permissible to pose a question through you to the developer in the public hearing?
I would rather you submit that to us in writing so we can pass it through and get an official response, please. Anybody else wish to speak on this? Seeing none. Oh, wait, we're seeing one.
Jennifer Lucht, 103 Federal Street. I'd just like to say that I oppose the discontinuance of Beckford Way, and haven't lived here very long, just about 2 years, and we're very excited. My husband and I, who grew up in Salem, we're very excited about a lot of the development we've seen happen in the city, and we would just ask that that not happen, take away the historic parts of the city to make development happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Again. Yeah. Councilor Fumiko.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the public hearing be closed.
Councilor Fumiko moves the public hearing be closed. Second by Councilor Epley. All those in favor? Opposed? So moved. Councilor Fumiko.
Thank you, Mr. President. I further move this matter be referred to the the Committee of Ordinances, Licenses, and Legal Affairs.
Refer to the council first. And then
Move to refer to the full council.
Councilor Fumiko moves that this be referred to the next council meeting. Seconded by Councilor Epley. All those in favor? Opposed? So moved. And somebody's phone just spoke. So, still the other ones, just to before we open and continue these remaining hearings, and just before we officially do so, I spoke with Attorney Carenti before this, and he asked that we give this a couple weeks and continue it to the last week in March if possible, where there's no conflicts with other city meetings other than our committee meeting that's scheduled for the 29th. So, yeah.
You get a chance, I'd like to speak on this issue.
Okay, since we haven't officially opened those yet, I guess I'll honor that. Go ahead.
I know the public meeting is closed, but I just wanted to make a few remarks. And I have some questions on this public way as to who owns it, and because I don't think the city or anybody else that I know of has a deed to it. And usually to convey property, you need a deed. I know my street. I can look up the deed to my street. I can see the meets and bounds when the people gave up access, because before that, all the abutters on my street owned to the middle of the street. For $1, they gave up the land from their house to the middle of the street because they wanted to have a public street that the city took care of. They wanted to have utility easements, all those things. And it all made sense, and it's what they wanted to do. It wasn't wrestled away from them. But there's no deed that the city has to this street. And as it says on the registry of deed walls, the deeds tell the story. We have to find the deed and the how, what, when, where, or why of who owns this street. And those are just such very important questions. Because if it's not owned by the city, it's a private way owned to the middle by the abutters. The 2 or 3 houses on the top of Bedford Way, the city, by virtue of their taking land from Universal Steel, and Webb if they own what Alpha used to own. But when you own to the middle of it, you don't just own to the middle of your section. You own to the middle per se, but you have the all equal rights, no matter how much you own or how much frontage you have, to the whole street. You have a say in what happens to the whole private way. So we have to clear all that up before we go forward with anything on this. And nobody has come forward with those kind of answers, right? So, it needs a little more research, I think. And with that in mind, I'd like to talk a little bit about the history. And I'm not trying to be a wise guy here, but there are times when our motto should be something like Salem: we preserve history sometimes, or maybe. Or Salem, a city with bouts of historic amnesia. Because, as growing up in Salem, I walked around downtown and I wondered, why were they tearing down the Paramount Theater? Not just the vaudeville theater, not just the theater where they had live acts, but the last of about 10 that they had in Salem. And we were building a parking garage. I heard stories from my parents of the old train depot and wondered why we tore that down. Wondered why we didn't preserve what was left of the Salem Armory or rebuild it. Wondered why we tore down St. Joe's. Had so much fanfare about finding the place where the alleged witches were murdered or hung, and when most of us knew where it was when we were kids. And now we have this, the last path to the ancient Essex Street that divided the peninsula, that was walked by not just our ancient ancestors, but by the Indians before them. It was Essex Street was the road that divided the peninsula, and the roads from the river south and north led to the middle street. And this is the last one that we can walk on that's as it was. So that in 1971, when they talk about urban renewal, there was a lot of pressure from the business interests. We had to widen our streets. We had to build more parking, get more cars in Salem, do more business, collect more tax revenue so we could lower all our property taxes. Sound familiar? History does repeat itself. And again, I've never seen a project that lowered my tax bill, and I'm seriously waiting for that one. So all that was going on. But in those days, there were some very concerned citizens of Salem, very concerned elders that knew a lot of the history of Salem. That may sound a little familiar to this argument too. And they stepped forward and they organized. And they stopped the destruction of hundreds of buildings downtown after we already lost about 170 important buildings, right? Including the Paramount Theater that I remember the most. The council may not have led the way in stopping that, but they did listen and follow the concern of the, follow the concerns of the elders of Salem. They didn't dig in their heels and continue to follow a bad plan. They listened to reason and they changed direction. They knew when to follow their people, and they knew when to lead, their people, and they knew when to follow them. They knew when to change direction. And didn't that make them good leaders by doing that? And I really ask this council to take their lead and show their kind of leadership. Know when to follow our people, know when to listen to all this information that's come along. Preserve this street and really think hard about this project. Thank you.
So, I believe the city solicitor wanted to.
Yes, I'll make sure that these plans that I'm going to refer to get put up on the website tomorrow. Back in the late 1800s, 1881, there was order of taking. And the rear portion of many residents' properties that went down to the mud flats and the winding river at the time was taken by an order of taking. After Bridge Street was constructed, that property that was taken was sold off. The city retained that 15-foot strip of land because there was a sewer line under it, and that way was preserved. So with respect to the title, we have that order of taking, of which this piece of property is part.
Thank you. So back to the discussion on the continuance to date certain. We have requests for us, and I would let the councilors have a consensus here. The request is that we continue this to the 30th or to the 31st of March.
Not the 31st.
Pardon?
Not the 31st.
Not the 31st? Councilor Famico?
Thank you, Mr. President. I move this matter be continued to...
I have to open it up first.
Okay.
Sorry, but if that's the
30th.
31st of the conflict then, so. All right, so I will officially open a public hearing of the City Council to convey a portion of 297 Bridge Street, 1,260 square feet, known as Parcel B, to Sun King LLC for the sum of $10,001 with a permanent pedestrian and vehicular access on the entire parcel for the benefit of 3032 Beckford Street. Councilor Famico.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move this hearing be continued into Wednesday, March the 30th at 6 p.m.
Councilor Famico moves that this be continued to date certain at Wednesday, March 30th at 6 p.m. Do I have a second? Second. Seconded by Councilor Epley. All those in favor? Opposed? So moved. Public hearing of the City Council, land disposition agreement and convey a portion 297 Bridge Street, 52,491 square feet, former Universal Steel, and 311 Bridge Street, 2,015 square feet to Sun King LLC, affiliate of FW Web Company, for the sum of $990,000. Councilor Famico.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move this be continued to Wednesday, March the 30th at 6 p.m.
Councilor Famico moves that this be continued to a time and date certain of Wednesday, March 30th at 6 p.m., seconded by Councilor Epley. All those in favor? Opposed? So moved. Councilor Fury. Councilor Fury moves we adjourn. All those in favor? Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.